Hello everybody, it's Nick here with Nick Tolman Music, and today we are going to continue our beginner guitar lesson series using Hal Leonard's guitar method, Book 1. Let's get started. So today we're going to go ahead and look at page 14 here in the Hal Leonard Guitar Method Book 1. And as always, if you haven't already, please check out my Patreon page and consider becoming a patron for Nick Tolman Music today. The link is in the description below. This is a great way to say thank you to Nick Tolman Music for providing these guitar lessons for you for free here on YouTube, but it's also a way to help this content to be able to continue. So again, please consider becoming a patron today. All right, so on page 14, we have a couple new concepts that are going to be taking place, but we also are going to be learning two new songs. All right, so we're going to be learning RLE and He's a Jolly Good Fellow. And then the concept that we're going to discuss that's new here is 3/4 time. All right, so in the very first lesson, we briefly discussed time signatures. We'll dive into that a little bit more fully today so you can understand exactly what's taking place here. But let's go ahead and just kind of go down in order. So we'll start with RLE. This one doesn't have any new concepts. It's just utilizing the notes on the first three strings. If you are struggling with that, please go back and review the last few lessons and kind of go from there. Kind of my approach, what I encourage students is to really try to perfect each exercise before you move on, or at least each page, like perfect each page before you go on to the next page. If you don't, what tends to happen is if you kind of move on prematurely, you tend to have gaps in your playing, and as things get more difficult, it's hard to recover from that. So be okay with the process being slow. All right, it's okay if it takes you a whole week to get through a page, or even 2 weeks or longer. Everybody moves at a different pace, and that's okay, but it is definitely better to try to perfect each exercise in each page as much as you can before moving on. All right. If you've been working on a page for a long time and you're just like totally sick of it, like you've been working on it for 2 weeks, you're struggling to make progress, you keep making the same mistakes, you're getting frustrated, definitely take a look at something different. I still wouldn't encourage you to go ahead in the book, but maybe go back. All right. So it's okay to go back and review some things. Like for me, that's really helpful when I'm struggling with new concepts and I'm putting in a lot of work and I'm really struggling to put it away for a while, look at some older things, kind of touch up on some other areas of things that I've worked on in the past, and then come back to it with some fresh eyes, and oftentimes that fixes the problems right away. But again, don't move ahead until you're ready to move ahead. Okay, so RLE, exercise 25. I'm going to go ahead and play it for you at 72 on the metronome, and then we're going to talk through it. So here is 72. 1, 2, ready, and play. All right, I kind of flubbed on one note there on the last line. That's all right, I'm going to let it go. It happens. All right, so let's kind of talk about some things that are going on here in this exercise. So the first thing that you're going to realize is that there's a lot of jumping back and forth between the strings, okay? Now, we've learned notes on the first three strings, but up to this point, a lot of the exercises that we've done have kind of been moving to those strings, but not moving between those strings, but not really frequently, right? You might play some notes on the first string for a little bit and then move to a few notes on the second string. This one bounces around quite a bit, and that tends to give people some problems. But let's talk about some stuff that you can do to maybe help with that. So starting at the beginning, we have open G, all right. So the first thing that I think that's going to help you with that is, again, we've talked about this a lot in this book so far, is minimizing movement in your left hand, all right? So again, we don't want flying fingers. We don't want this to look like... right? We want it to look nice and smooth, nice and efficient. Okay? So what that means in practice is when you get in that first measure, we've got G, C, B, C. Now, at this point, as soon as I play that last note in the first measure, I'm going to leave that C down. I'm going to play D. I'm going to leave both of those down. So I'm leaving my C and D down. I'm just going to reach my second finger down and hit that A. But when I come back to the D, it's already there, okay? Right? See how efficient that is? I'll do it one more time for you. Okay, we're going to do it again. Off. All right. So that, to me, that's kind of a key spot in this particular song, is just really getting that efficiency down, moving between the first and second measure. Okay. So practice that as many times as you need to. Okay, and then when you get to the third and fourth measure, it is a little bit more jumpy between the second and third string. Again, I would just focus on that chunk for a little bit and loop it as many times as you need to feel comfortable. And as always, on all of these, practice them slow, 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 slow. So you're doing it nice and smooth, nice and connected, making a good sound on everything before you build up the speed. But make sure you're being efficient with your fingers even when you're playing it really slowly. All right? Then we move into, I guess, the fourth measure here on the second line, and we just got some open E's. Nothing fancy. Nothing fancy there. Good, I'm going to do the same thing there. So this is the fourth measure of the third line. We got D, A, D. I'm just going to leave that D down. Right? And that is our lead. All right, so here's what it sounds like, chords and melody together at 72 on the metronome, RLE. Feel free to play along. Here we go. 1, 2, ready and go. And there it is. Let's go ahead and jump this up to 120. And here's the melody. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, and... Let's go ahead and add the chords to this. So this is chords and melody together, RLE at 120 on the metronome. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, and... And there it is. All right, so let's go ahead and move to exercise 26 here on the book. Now, this is our introduction into 3/4 time. We discussed this a little bit in the very first lesson, but you'll notice those numbers that you see at the very beginning of the staff on every song, right? There's always a set of numbers there, and what those numbers are they are called a time signature, and it's telling you two things, all right? It's telling you how many beats are in every measure in the music, and it's also telling you what kind of note is responsible for the beat and what note we're using to count the beat, okay? So the top number is always telling you how many beats are in every measure, always. So whether that's 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, it literally could be any number. It could be 37 if you wanted to. That's very, very uncommon. But the top number can be anything, right? You can have any number of beats in a measure. Generally, what we see the most is either 4, that's the most common, or we see a 3 or a 2. Sometimes we see 6 as well, that's also pretty common. And sometimes you might see like 1. And then beyond that, it's less common, but you still might see like a 5 or a 7. Maybe a 12. Okay, so it's just however the composer of the music has determined to separate the music into beats, all right? Again, the most common is 4, but 3 is also very common, right? So the bottom number tells you what kind of note is responsible for getting the beat. The most common thing to see on the bottom is a 4. And that means that a quarter note gets the beat. That's why we teach from the very beginning, oh, a quarter note gets 1 beat, because that is the most common. However, that is not always the case. If that number on the bottom changes, that changes how we think about notes, right? So another very common thing that you might see on the bottom is an 8. If you see an 8 on the bottom, that means an 8th note, which we haven't learned yet in the book. But an 8th note is responsible for getting a beat. An 8th note is exactly half the duration of a quarter note. So if an 8th note is getting the beat, that means that now a quarter note gets 2 beats, right? Whoa! Mind blown, right? We'll get more into that later. Don't worry too much about it. For now, a quarter note just gets 1 beat, so don't stress too much about that. But that's what we're looking at. So a quarter note on the bottom, or a 4 on the bottom, means that a quarter note is getting the beat, all right? So 3/4 time is going to sound like, rather than 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, is going to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? A waltz is always in 3/4 time. It always has that fill. Bum, 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 bum. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? So that's what we're going to be looking at here in 26. All of our note values are still the same, although it is going to introduce us into a new concept as well with that, okay? So you're not ever going to see a whole note in 3/4 time because a whole note gets 4 beats and we don't have that many beats in a measure. So you're just not going to see it, okay? But what you are going to see is what we call a dotted half note, all right? Now, if you look at, it's kind of explaining that in the second little paragraph under 3/4 time here on the page. But you see it in the 4th measure of number 26. We have a half note, and there's a little dot just to the right of that half note. And a dotted half note is equal to 3 beats, okay? So a half note is 2 beats. A dotted half note is 3 beats. Now, the math of it works out like this. You can actually put a dot next to any note, and the dot is always equal to half the value of whatever note it's attached to, all right? So a half note is equal to 2 beats. You put a dot next to it. The dot is equal to half of the value of that note. So if a half note is 2 beats, half of that would be 1. So the dot is equal to 1 beat, and then you add those together and you have 3 beats, okay? So if you had a dot next to a whole note, how many beats would it be worth? A whole note is 4 beats. The dot is equal to half of that value, which would be 2. Put them together. A dotted whole note would be 6 beats. That's actually not super common to see, but something that you might see is a dotted quarter note. All right, so a dotted quarter note. A quarter note gets 1 beat. A dot is equal to half of that value, so half of a beat. Put them together. A dotted quarter note would equal 1 1/2 of a beat. 1.5 beats. All right. That might seem scary right now. We'll learn how to do that in the future. But for now, just remember that a dotted half note is equal to 3 beats. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at exercise 26. Here it is at 72 on the metronome. And let's go. 1, 2, ready, and play. 1, 2, 3, half note. 1, 2, 3. Half note. 1, 2, 3, off. Look at that. It's all one note. I mean, that should be really easy. You're not doing anything with your left hand. We're just drilling the feel of playing with 3 beats in every measure and also getting used to seeing that dotted half note. All right. Let's try it at 120 on the metronome. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, ready, and. 2, 3, off. And that's all there is to it. Really, exercise 26 is all about just familiarizing yourself with 3/4 time. But guess what? You're going to get more practice with it because exercise 27 is also in 3/4 time. So let's take a look there. He's a jolly good fellow. We're going to start at 72 on the metronome. I'm going to play it for you, and we will go from there. 1, 2, 3, 1. Ready, and play. 2, 3, off. All right. So that is dreadfully slow for that song. If you're familiar with that melody you use, he's a jolly good fellow, and 72 on the metronome is way too slow. But that's okay. Practice it slow and slowly build it up. And if it's super easy for you, start building right away. If not, spend your time at 72 and you'll get to the faster tempo. It's okay. All right. All right, so as far as things that are tricky, I would just watch out for the fact that you have 3 beats in every measure. At this point, it might just feel a little weird, so you just got to kind of get used to that. All right, make sure you're counting those dotted half notes for 3 beats and make sure that everything's good. Other than that, there's nothing really that tricky about this one. It's just kind of playing the notes down. There's not a lot of skips. There's not a lot of places where it's really crucial that you minimize finger movement over here. I mean, you're always trying to do that anyway. But there's, like I said, it's not that tricky. So just kind of get used to feeling that 3 beats in every measure, and that's good. If you have a metronome, some metronomes have the ability to accent 1 beat. So this one I'm using is just a click. It's a really straightforward metronome. But if you use a metronome on your phone, or even if you have a metronome device that's a little more fancy, you can accent a beat. So for instance, I'm going to set this. I'm going to set my meter. Metronome is the Cadenza app, which I use on an iPhone. I think it's also available on Android. And so I'm setting it to 3/4 time. And now you'll notice that first beat is higher pitched. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. If you're having trouble feeling the 3/4 time and getting lost with that beat, maybe trying a metronome like that you can do that with might help. Again, the app here that I'm using on the phone, and I like this app a lot for metronome, also has a tuner, is called Cadenza. I will put a link in the description below so you can check it out on the Apple Store. All right. So here we go. Let's go ahead and try He's a Jolly Good Fellow at faster tempo. This is 120 on the metronome. 1, 2, 3, 1, ready, and. All right, so now even 120 is slower than what you're used to hearing this melody. I'm going to go ahead and play the chords for you at 120 so you can practice singing along at that tempo, but then I will also take it up to a faster tempo so you can hear what it sounds like more at a tempo of what you're used to hearing this song at. So here's the chords at 120. 1, 2, 3, 1, ready, and. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and set my metronome at 200. Now, this song can even go faster than this, but this is a good maybe goal tempo to look at. Oftentimes you feel this particular song in kind of like a 1. 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Like in a really fast kind of 3, 4 feel. I don't really want to worry about that right now, but you can just set your metronome basically as fast as you can get it to go and get a faster feel for He's a Jolly Good Fellow. So here's 200 on the metronome. We'll go ahead and try it there. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, ready, and. There we go. And already you're noticing that feels a lot better. Like, oh yeah, that's He's a Jolly Good Fellow. I know that melody. Good, so let's, I'll go ahead and play the chords for you at that tempo so you can practice along. And again, great goal tempo. That's 200 on the metronome. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, ready, play it. and that's He's a Jolly Good Fellow. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and stay tuned for our next guitar lesson. We'll see you next time. Thanks.